Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show, right here on Truth Frequency Radio. So glad to be back with you. Another week lies ahead. Tomorrow night I've got Brendan Drackler back on the show. Yes, our own, well, it feels like our very own astrophysicist. But of course, Brendan has his very own podcast as well, called The State of the Universe. So yes, we'll be shilling for NASA tomorrow night, as myself and Brendan often get accused of. But tonight, what a way to kick off the week. I can't think of anyone better to be joining me than my good friend, live from the bunker. Yes, indeed. It's Charlie Robinson. What's happening, man? Are the Chi-Coms coming? What's going on?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chi-Coms have invaded. They're coming. I'm in the bunker.
So what's going on, man? How are you keeping, Charlie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You know, never a dull moment in my corner of the Matrix, but same story for everyone. So what's going on? Should we be worried? Are you in hiding from the deep state?
I am officially in hiding from the movers upstairs that are moving as much of our stuff. Yeah, we're in the middle of a move, so and we're in the middle of a snowstorm that is about to hit as well. So if there's anything that goes well with a move, it's a gigantic snowstorm. So we love this.
Come on, man. I'm in the UK. All us Brits, especially us Scots, we love to talk about the weather. We love to moan, and we're getting told over here, although it feels a bit like a constant replay every year, this is going to be the coldest winter that we felt in 10 years. Well, whether it transpires or not, that's another thing, but really, is it something to get excited about? It's winter. It's going to get cold, all right?
They act like it's like a surprise every year. They're like, listen, it's cold. You know, it's or went during the summer. It's hot. It's global warming. It's like, it's also summer, you know, or it's also winter. Maybe that has some explanation for why it's cold. Around here, though, people freak out. It's like Stormwatch 2019, you know, and it's breaking news and it's all this nonsense. It's like, all right, well, it's just, you know, it's just a little rain and a little bit of snow, but it's got to be the biggest, you know, it's got to be made into a gigantic news event. But whatever. So we just picked the wrong time to decide to move. We've got Thanksgiving coming up here in a couple of days, and obviously snow and moving our house. So yeah, but I'll tell you what, even with all that, I said I need 2 hours. Just give me 2 hours. I'll get back to work afterwards, but I need 2 hours to go over to Kev's house because we're going to talk about Mummy canceling Andrew's birthday party.
Even before we get there, though, right? See, in recent years, well, when I was growing up, and we're about the same age, now, we obviously had a lot of the same shows that you guys had over there out of America. And we got to see what the typical kind of teenage life was like in America, you know, the prom, all of that kind of stuff going on. But it was very American, Charlie. And of course, there was your take on Halloween, which was always a bit more bold, bit bigger than anything we done over here. And Thanksgiving, like you mentioned there. Something else that, you know, we didn't have over here. We couldn't really relate to it. But there's something else that goes along with all of that. And unfortunately, the only thing that hasn't made it over to this side of the Atlantic is the Thanksgiving meal. But it's the thing that comes after Thanksgiving. And myself, Joe, and Scott, we look forward to this time of year. We do. Because it's kind of like car crash TV. It's the running of the sheeple. The annual running of the sheeple when people literally want to go to war, purge style, over a $5 toaster. I can't wait, dude. It's great.
I love it. I love Black Friday. Not because I'm shopping, not because I'm going to get a good deal on something. I love it just for the sheer insanity of the news coverage, of the people that are camping out there. You know, the stores, it's not like they just built them and are having a grand opening on the Friday after Thanksgiving. You know, the stores were there on Wednesday as well. And you could very easily just go there on Wednesday. But no. We got to have everybody line up for these Black Friday deals. And I think it's an indicator of where, like, you want to see what a dress rehearsal for the apocalypse looks like. just watch Black Friday, because if people are willing to stab an old lady for a $3 can opener, what are they willing to do once they've run out of gas and it's been a month since they've had, clean drinking water anywhere where they can have access to it? I mean, they'll put a bunch of batteries in a sock and knock your ass out trying to, get a couple boxes of cereal once the stores empty out. So it's madness on like a sort of semi-controlled scale. It's fun to watch the sheeple just battle each other for cheap Chinese goods that were available literally 24 hours earlier, but for some reason they've decided they need to line up and fight other people just to get them. It's a case study in psychopathy, I mean,
I don't know about over there, right? But I mean, Amazon, I would imagine it's the same in the American.com to the .co.uk, but you've got like the fortnight before Black Friday now, and it's almost like turning into a full Black November. It's crazy. And having worked in retail, doing security, far too much time on my hands, far too much time in electronic stores, Charlie. You would gradually catch on to what they do. Anyway, it's all an illusion. It literally is, because if you go into the stores about 4 months before Black Friday, like summertime, early summer, sometimes you're actually going to find the goods cheaper than what they're going to be on Black Friday. But of course, they boost them in the months beforehand, and that gives it the illusion of this grand sale that they're having. But in reality, if you're a bit kind of use your nous, you could go out there and get it early.
Of course. It's and you can wait till after Christmas too and get it for a real discount. But this is America. We do what our television tells us to do. And our television gets us all revved up for this Black Friday. I'm just waiting for the social justice warriors to start protesting the name. Like, why it got to be Black Friday? Why can't it be White Friday? Or, it was White Friday for so long, now it's got to be Black Friday. I mean, the whole thing is preposterous. It's sort of a indictment on American culture too. I mean, I feel like I'm embarrassed of our behavior.
But listen,
collectively.
It's exactly the same over here. You've got people camping out. It's really, it took root fast over here. The first year, there was even talk of cancelling it altogether because it was mayhem. It was one of your good annual running of the sheeple, I thought. But yeah, it's exactly the same over here. And listen, folks, obviously, you're listening to Charlie Robinson. And as you can gather, me and Charlie get on rather well. That well that sometimes I even forget that we're doing a show here. And some of you might not appreciate just who Charlie is. So for those of you out there who don't know Charlie, he's the author of a book called The Octopus of Global Control. And of course, last night on the live stream, what were we talking about? The tentacles? Yes, indeed. You see, that's how we kind of semi-link things in. And it's a controversial and hilarious book that features the opinions of over 500 experts that expose and explain the century-long plan for world domination by that global elite. Now, he actually had a front row seat to the fraud and corruption in the mortgage industry during his 10-year career in Las Vegas real estate. And he actually credits John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, as the final piece of the puzzle that helped him to really see how the American government operates. It lifted the veil, so to speak. And Charlie is an entrepreneur with a marketing degree from the University of Southern California, no less. And this is the best bit. He agrees with comedian Bill Hicks that everyone in marketing should kill themselves. So yes, there probably is going to be some comedy splattered in between some really serious topics, and there is still something serious rumbling on right now. The media are really in limbo because they're struggling how to cope and how to put a lid on Prince Andrew, old Jeffrey, that story, and that interview. That awkward interview that I suppose, with hindsight and a time machine, they would go back and never do again. What was that all about, Charlie? Prince Andrew trying to do damage control, and for me, he might as well have had a shovel digging his own grave.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. I hope he does a second one because the first one went so well. I mean, it's really kind of a case study in in arrogance and sort of, you know, how a psychopathic narcissistic mind works too, because everybody else knew this was going to be an unabashed disaster except for him. He thought, this is going to go well. You know, I'm going to come in, I'm going to explain it all away, and it'll be fine. Not realizing that, like, over the course of this guy's 60 years, he hasn't had to sharpen his argumenting, his debating skills very much, because he comes from a family where everybody just does what they say and nods their head and goes along with it and listens to them, believes them. Maybe they don't believe them, but they're still going to do what they tell them to do anyway. And he took this approach to the people, and the people weren't having it, because the people were like, hey, listen, this nonsense might work when you're ordering your servants around or the people that draw paychecks from you, but the rest of us are watching this whole thing, and you sound like a jackass, and you sound completely out of touch, and you're obviously lying. You're clearly, you know, you don't have, I mean, you have a lot of practice at lying, but clearly not very many skills when it comes to that. I mean, he hasn't had to. He could say whatever he wants. He could say that the sun, you know, rises in the west and sets in the east, and all the little servants around them for his entire life would just go, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, yes, Andrew, that's correct, whatever you say. But that doesn't work now. It doesn't work with the rest of us. The rest of us are pissed. But we kind of want him to, you know, like when you get somebody, when the police get a suspect and they're interrogating them, they don't just like say, we got all the goods on you, you know, buddy, we're gonna make sure you do 100 years in prison. They act really nice and they say, tell me more, keep going. Oh no, tell me about, what about this? You know, maybe fill in this detail, or could you tell me this story again? That's how I'm approaching this. Andrew's talking about maybe doing a second interview. My feeling is, oh, please come back in and enlighten us. Keep talking. Keep this guy talking. The more this guy talks, the more he's going to dig his own grave, because he can't keep his lies straight. He says he doesn't sweat, which is, besides being a dumb one, it's a really weird one. I mean, I guess if you're like part reptilian, maybe you don't sweat. I don't know. Maybe that's where he's going with it.
Exactly my comment when me and Scott spoke about it. Exactly what I thought. I mean, not sweating. When did that make sense to anyone? That would
He's
be
like I didn't shed my skin when I was with her. Like, wait, what?
I didn't shapeshift like my mother does and things like that. No. But I mean,
right.
Another aspect of the video that may be lost on some people is who was doing it. This was hardly a hostile interview. This was the BBC. No. Basically, if this was in Syria or the Middle East, they would call it state TV. You know, because it's paid for by the British people through taxation, it's licensing and stuff like that. So they had this big kind of article in the UK I was looking at yesterday, and honestly, to listen to it, you'd think that Prince Andrew was in Guantanamo and it was some interrogation that he faced. But for me, Charlie, something like that, we say that when you're watching the media, it's theatre anyway, but you can't tell me that he didn't exactly know where that was going. And that makes it even worse, because either somebody told him that was a good thing to say various times for all the bits that he did say, or he just was that narcissistic that he sits and he can think there, or he can just say anything, but his body language says something completely different.
Well, this is a home game for him. He's literally at home. He's got a friendly BBC that mom controls, asking him the questions. I mean, the setup, the scenario for this, it's not ever going to get any better than this. It's really not. So for him to do this interview, let me back up a little bit and just give you a tiny bit of backstory as to why my background might be important here. I own a company with a friend of mine, my business partner, that's does media training for professional athletes. We get guys ready for interviews when they're coming out of college and they're going to get drafted into the pros, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever, tennis. We've got our clients we've got at least a half a dozen guys that have been the #1 overall pick in their sport. I mean, names that you would really know. And we do this. We get these guys ready for interviews, and we explain to them how the media works, So part of the reason why in my book I'm so critical of the media, well, for one, they deserve for people to be critical of them, but two, I worked with these people for a while. I understand how they operate. They are not your friend. So when I'm watching the Andrew interview, this is the stuff we advise our clients against doing. The only way we would ever advise our clients to do an interview like this is if we knew every single question that was going to be answered or asked, and we had all the answers to it in advance. Otherwise, there's no way you walk into this interview. This is idiotic. It's arrogant and it's idiotic. But then again, because of his status and because of who was conducting the interview, you would think it would just be a layup, right? You'd think he'd just be able to, handle these questions. It's as if he never knew they were coming. It's as if he didn't prepare for it at all. And, you got to run through these scenarios. You got to ask the questions and someone's got to practice with you. Somebody's got to be an aggressive interviewer to try and trip you up and see how you handle it. And if things don't go well, you'll cancel the interview. You shouldn't do it in the first place. But even if you feel, like you've got a really strong case, but when you start to try this thing out with a friend, when you're just sort of role playing it, and you start to notice that the guy can't even answer the most basic questions when he's sitting across from somebody that's a friend of his or that's on his side, you cannot let this interview happen. You just can't, because this information, this is the genie that gets out of the bottle. You can never put it back. So now, before everybody thought Prince Andrew was a pedophile, close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, really questionable decision making. Now they know it. Now it's certain. Now he has removed all doubt. So I hope he does a second interview, because I don't like him and I want him to, feel the wrath of the public, as much as that's going to do for a guy like that. But like on a professional level, if you're this PR guy, like you have to restrain him from getting in front of a camera the first time. Certainly the second time, nothing is. And think about this: if he's this bad on a home game, under getting questioned at home, how would he deal with this if he was actually brought down to a police station? How would he deal with this if he was in front of a judge in the United States, if they extradited him to answer some questions? I mean, those are professional question askers. They'll destroy you. They're not asking questions they don't already have the answer for. And they're 4 steps ahead of you, leading you down a path, closing doors along the way. So they back you into this corner and then they just hammer you.
But you see, this is the difference, especially with an individual such as Prince Andrew, because it's kind of cliche, one rule for them, another rule for us. But he's literally the them that we're talking about, because there's not many people that you could say is really above the law. And I'm not claiming he's technically above the law in this country, but Charlie, think how comical it is, right? Let's say hell freezes over and they get him to a police station, Her Majesty's Police Force. Don't worry about that, right? They take him in, the questioning's done. They decide to charge him. Crown prosecution services, the Crown prosecution, right? And then you get to a Crown court. Do you think maybe, do you think, you hear about juries being biased and things, but talk about the court. Your mum owns it. Do you know what I mean? And I hate to make a joke out of something so terribly serious, but people know how I roll. They know how I know how serious this is. And I've been thinking about it. Because everything you said there is 110% correct, and I'd back you up on everything. There's one thing I would throw into the mix for people to consider, and it means nothing, but if there was any time, any perfect time for him, if he was determined, we don't know what he's like behind closed doors. We don't know if he's like cocky, sure of himself. I'll go out there and I'll tell them, that kind of attitude. With a general election and the Brexit thing rumbling in the UK right now, I'm not saying that people aren't paying attention to Andrew, not at all. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I tell you what, there's the perfect level of other stuff going on for it maybe, Charlie, just to simmer out and business as usual. Do you see where I'm coming from there?
Oh yeah, I think that
You know, media. You know, if it's going to come out, if this guy's determined to do it, well, let's find the best time. You know.
yeah, yeah, and there's a news cycle. It usually here in the United States, it's about 24 hours, maybe 48 hours if it's a big story, maybe 72 hours if it's a big time school shooting or some mass shooting. But you want if you're crisis if you're somebody that does crisis intervention for guys like this, you tell him to run out the clock. You tell him to just wait for the cycle to change, wait for the story to go away. I had this conversation actually with Sean Atwood because we were talking about the we were talking about how the media would like to have the media's role in this story, and I was saying that I think that the people that are in positions of power that are really getting attacked or in the limelight because of this would prefer that Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, Prince Andrew, if any, all four of those people all be in the news at the exact same time, as opposed to drip, 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 and making this story last 2 years. Right now, the way it is they've just, it's just Epstein. Epstein's dead. We're looking for Maxwell. We're looking for Brunel. Now we've got Prince Andrew. Drag him into the limelight. Drip, 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 drip. Then get Ghislaine Maxwell. You find her, grab her. Boom, boom, boom. This is better for us. It's better for us that it stays in the news cycle. It refreshes with a new topic, but keeps the Epstein pedophilia type thing in the news cycle. That's what we as humanity, as decent human beings, want. What they want, what the people that are involved in this, is they obviously want it all to go away. And it's hard for it to go away when news is dripping out every couple of weeks. So in a situation like this, it might be good timing, as far as there's a lot of other things going on and distractions. But I'm sure that they would prefer that all of this, the arrest of Maxwell, the arrest of Brunel, the death of Epstein, and the interrogation of Andrew all happened in 2019, and then sort of be done with and forget about it, so they can move on to something new in 2020, namely the presidential elections. But it's kind of up to us. It's sort of in our best interest to keep this in the forefront, to keep dragging it out, to keep the Epstein didn't kill himself memes going and all that, because what it's doing is it's giving us, it's putting the power back in our hands a little bit to tell the rest of the world through social media that we're not done with this story. You guys in the news media may want it to go away. Clearly, ABC wanted to spike the story with Amy Robach and all that, because they just would prefer it to not be in the headlines and not be talked about. Because the longer it's talked about, the greater the chances are that somebody else is going to have their name involved in it, or there's going to be another Project Veritas like story where a news anchor gets caught talking about how her boss has spiked the story. So this is in the media's, and the media typically likes to beat these stories to death, kind of keep them going as long as possible. But this is a different situation because the people at high levels in the media are involved in this. So this story is different. They want it to actually go away. And so, if Andrew, maybe they made the decision that Andrew is going to try and get out in front of it. Either way, maybe he did get out in front of it. He got it out. It's talked about now, and then it'll be forgotten. But it's kind of up to us to make sure it doesn't get forgotten.
Absolutely muted up there. But apologies for that. But no, yeah. Listen to what Charlie's saying there. The memes talking about the fact that Epstein, like Christmas lights, they don't hang themselves.
There's some good ones out there. Man. There are some that I have just laughed out loud. But
Charlie, I want people to realize as well, though, this is a really effective tool to bring people to the party, so to speak, because even people that were unquestioning before are looking at stories like this one and really starting to look at these characters, like the royal family, for example, in a totally different light. But never think that what's happening here unfortunately, I don't think we're going to go any lengths to putting any of them in jail or helping to bring any ease to the victims that have suffered, are still suffering, and are yet to come. All we can do, the best we can hope for, is raise awareness and not let this go away. And we'll come back on the other side. We won't let it go away. More to get into with Charlie Robinson. Don't go anywhere. There we go, Charlie. There we go. Yes, I'd love to see these people facing justice, but the likelihood of that, like you say, that this one goes to the very, very top, sir. I mean,
well,
the elites.
we need to set the bar a little differently for this. By the way, we're still on YouTube?
We're on YouTube.
We need to set the bar a little differently with regard to the royal family. We might need to just sort of incrementally work our way up here, because like you and I are already a couple steps ahead of the majority of the people that are just hearing about the royal family and watching this on the news. Like, we already know about Mountbatten, we know about Jimmy Savile, we know about, all of the people that are connected to the royal family, the pedophilia in the royal family. But for a lot of people, this is like the first they're hearing of it. And so I think that for the masses, the first step with this Prince Andrew is to make sure that everybody realizes that the royal family is not as clean as they appear to be. That's step one. Maybe some people will take that and dig into it, and they'll find out the multiple layers of pedophilia that are a part of that. I have been.
One of the ways I find effective when it comes to the royal family, because a lot of royalists, as you can imagine, over here, not too many in Scotland, however, don't go for like that topic right away. I usually find if you mention, research their actual names, the Saxa, Gotha, Coburgs, that very German name, and people, they kind of look at you funny and go, never. And you'll see them Googling it on the phone, and either they'll come back and talk to you about it, or at least they'll know, well, hang on a minute, he was right there. And you're sowing the seed. Now, 9 times out of 10, they're going to come back and go, that's weird, that's mad. Then show them the Queen doing that. The bad guys from World War II, their very famous salute. I wouldn't want to do it on camera.
Yeah.
Even dogs doing it on camera in Scotland have been to court. Count Dankula, anyone? So I can't do that. I know, it's crazy here, Charlie.
It's madness.
I'm like
this is
walking
totally
a
insane,
minefield. Yeah, I've got to watch what hand signals I make. I'm just going to go like that. I'm just going to have closed fists, okay? That probably means something.
Just wear boxing gloves to do your presentation.
Yeah, so
you can't
I mean, most people, when you hit them with like the deep, the dark, and the dirty right away, there is going to be an emotional reaction, and it's a knee-jerk reaction. And I find, like I say, just slowly, gently, but your book, and I'm not just saying this, Charlie, your book, it's in their own words. So you can use quotes from people that tell the story that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Prince Philip said that he wanted to come back as a virus so that he could wipe out 90% of humanity. He said it. I just put it in the book because he's the one that said it. And so you're right, though. You're right with this incremental sort of explanation of people. If you drop, David Icke shape-shifting reptilians on somebody speaking of Thanksgiving, at the Thanksgiving dinner table, everyone will get up and just have you fitted for a straitjacket, but if you explain to them that maybe, their last name is Saxe Coburg Gotha and that they're of German descent, and that, that Prince Philip fella, he was on the other team during the war. Did you know that? No, that's not true. Well, what about the pictures of him? We got pictures of him in that
That's why I had
special
to
black uniform made by Hugo Boss.
Yeah, in the UK, Harry, the young one that's married to Meghan Markle, he wore that uniform to a fancy dress party, a Halloween party, and the UK went mad, absolutely mad, because he was wearing that uniform. And I'm thinking, but Prince Philip gets a pass,
Right?
What is that all about? So we're going to go back to the network now, folks. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned in live to the Kev Baker Show on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Now, you may be listening on the website. If you are, please share it on Twitter, Facebook, any social media. Big shout out to everyone at iHeartRadio, TuneIn, radio apps. We've got TalkStream Live as well. And, of course, everyone over at the TFR Live chat room and simulcasting here on YouTube. Charlie Robinson, look at him, all prepped and ready to go in the bunker. It's weird, dude. The other night with Joe and Scott, we were doing a Freaky Friday, kind of dedicated to end-of-the-world scenarios. Then I came across a story about a guy that had been living in an underground bunker ready for the apocalypse for like 20 years or something. The first thing you say to me tonight is, Kev, it's madness here, I'm in the bunker. And I'm thinking, wow, what crazy stuff, dude. And of course, I mean, you're still in the region of Colorado, right?
I am. We're just moving like 20 minutes away. Just enough to make it so that you have to box everything up and create havoc in your life.
You're not under Denver Airport or anything, or Cheyenne. You're not nothing that neck of the woods, no?
No. We're about 30 minutes from there. But
connected,
I mean, with the underground tunnels, man.
Yeah, I was going to
say. The underground tunnels make commuting real easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of these kind of pneumatic tunnels you blowing across as you in there. But no, Charlie Robinson, ladies and gentlemen, the author of The Octopus of Global Control. And this book is armed with hundreds of quotes from the very elites that we're talking about today and others, exposing an age-old plan. That plan to form a new world order. And of course, a big part of that plan through the ages, Charlie, have been the bloodlines, if you want to get all sensational and conspiratorial, but the establishment, the royal families, and they are bloodlines when you boil it down. And that's where we are today, and that's why this story in particular, we've talked about it a couple of times now, and you gave us some of the backstory on Andrew's friend, Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. Well, it was just the other day that we had Barr coming out and saying it was all the perfect storm, what happened that led to the unfortunate, untimely death of Jeffrey Epstein in a cell in New York. Now, that character there, Barr, he's very interesting because I remember you bringing him up before, and here he is now, almost dotting the I's and crossing the T's on what's been a really successful operation if you're coming from the establishment side. Yeah,
and his father, let's not forget that Barr's dad is the one who brought Jeffrey Epstein to the Dalton School, right? I mean, he's the one that was the one who hired him, apparently. I don't know if he was still there after he hired him. I think he might have been in transition and left. But regardless, in a city like New York City with, I don't know, what do they have, 11 million people, 14 million people, 10 million plus people, the attorney general that's going to look into a global head of a pedophile ring just happens to have a dad who hired the guy to teach at his school. I mean, forgive me if I'm a bit dismissive of Barr's actual intent in really digging to the bottom of this. I mean, everything about it stinks. Nothing sets my mind at ease that he's going to actually look into this. He strikes me as a cover-up artist. Anytime they drag the FBI into a situation like this, they are almost always covering things up. I see that they've tried to place the blame for all this on two dopey security guards that fell asleep or were online shopping, buying furniture. I mean, I feel like it's kind of these lies are so bad that they're kind of insulting at this point. Like, they really don't have much respect for us. If this is the extent of the lies that they're telling us. I mean, they might as well just say, we were, the doors opened, we saw these grays, they came in, they stunned us, and then they then they hung Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it's a stupid story, but it's as believable as the official story. I mean, everything about it doesn't add up.
Part of me thinks
here we go. They're going to pin it on these security guards because, after all, the security guards are clearly the ones behind this. I mean, the whole thing is fake.
And Charlie, part of me thinks, right, that it's almost too fake. It's almost like too ridiculous. And we've rightly been concentrating on all the irregularities, all the things that could have gone wrong, couldn't have gone wrong. The fact you possibly could not have done what they told us in that cell. It couldn't have gone down the way that we're told. And while we're focusing on that, we've had the disappearance of Ghislaine Maxwell, the handler, in my opinion. We've had time for any of the black books and evidence that may or may not have been around. If it was around, it's gone. And now, after all of that, waiting to find out what would be said about, let's face it, what was a ridiculous cover story. And you've got this bar dude, somebody who's been in there, his family at least, from the start with Epstein, coming along and giving us this ridiculous kind of conclusion. And now everyone's going to be talking about that and Epstein still. And you see how attention's taken away and diverted from the characters that are still in play. The story is dying with Epstein because unfortunately, and rightly so, people are still talking about him.
Yeah, and I hope we talk about it for a long time, but I hope we get off of the topic, the sort of false trails that they're sending out about guards falling asleep and things like that. Let's focus on the important things. Like Jeffrey Epstein was working for intelligence agencies, and the intelligence agencies knew that what he was doing was trafficking young children. So they are supposed to break up pedophile rings when they find them, right? And not create them and use them and leverage them. So what we have to acknowledge is that definitely the Mossad was involved in this, but you gotta think that if the Mossad is running a blackmail operation, the CIA at the very minimum knows about it, if not is involved in it as well. So if they are involved in it, or if they know about it, which I'm sure they did, then we're talking about tax dollars that go to fund these intelligence agencies being used to make sure that nobody breaks them up, make sure that nobody breaks up the pedophile ring that's operating in 3 different jurisdictions of the United States. So this is it's a coordinated effort to keep it silent. Let's remember that. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't getting massages from hookers, as Alan Dershowitz would have you believe. He was having sex with minors. That's pedophilia. That's not just some rich dude that wants to get a massage from a 19-year-old girl. This, or Ghislaine Maxwell is, a madam or anything like that. Like, let's call it what it is. It's child rape. It's human trafficking. It's pedophilia. That's what it is. It's not minor attracted persons or somebody who's just a rich pervert. I mean, these are all the ways you mitigate the reality of the situation. This is what the media does when they find a situation that they want to downplay, is they start to give it funky names like this in an attempt to hide the reality of the situation. Ghislaine Maxwell is not a madam. She's a pedophile, child rapist, human trafficker. She should be dealt with accordingly. Jean-Luc Brunel, same thing, although his case is going to be a little bit different, but he's definitely was on the procuring end of this. Prince Andrew is not some hapless John who was driving around the streets trying to get a $20 hand job from some prostitute that's standing outside in the cold, right? It's much different than that. And we need to make sure that the media is phrasing it with the correct terminology to give it the seriousness that it deserves. Because if you let them control the narrative on this, they'll have you thinking that this was just some sort of, bachelor party gone awry with a little bit too much alcohol and, things happened and, mistakes were made and, lessons were learned. No. This was going on for decades. This was orchestrated at the highest levels. This was very well financed. Who financed it? Who allowed it to happen? Who, Les Wexner is saying, oh, well, Jeffrey had me fooled. Bullshit. He did not have you fooled. You financed this. You know it. The rest of us are waking up to it. The authorities need to know about it. Les Wexner's not some nice, sweet old man who's just like running Victoria's Secrets and the Limited and making some money and made a mistake and accidentally had some New York guy, Bernie Madoff him into convincing him to give him a penthouse and manage all his money. Those are lies. These are the lies that, and not even very good lies at that, but these are the lies that they tell to try and, distance themselves from this. This was orchestrated. Les Wexner's involved in this. You don't give somebody a $77 million penthouse that's filled with surveillance equipment and monitoring stations and video recording stations as a gift if you don't want them to use it. So the question is, what's going on here? Dig into the mega group. Dig into Les Wexner, co-founder of the mega group, Bronfman's co-founder of the mega group. What do they have in common? They're both running child sex trafficking operations and blackmail entrapment rings. This is what they're doing. Bronfman's with Nexium, Les Wexner with Epstein and company. Keep digging. This is the tip of the iceberg. So it's important for us to we can have these discussions with everyone. We can do this. You have these discussions on social media, but let's just really try to be careful of how we frame it so that we don't fall into the trap of using their terminology. Let's make sure that we use the most graphic and accurate terminology possible, because without that, it's just over time, it'll be whitewashed. And the next thing you know, it'll just be like, oh, that wacky Jeffrey Epstein. He's kind of like Jimmy Savile, right? He's just having a good time and he's jogging for charity. And he's just, hand up the skirt on national TV as Savile would do all the time. Oh, that's just Jimmy being Jimmy. No, none of that. Don't allow them to do this, because the next thing, when we get 10 years from now, if we let the media do their thing, they will paint this as a very different story. They'll paint this as Jeffrey Epstein being a philanthropist interested in AI and science who liked young girls. But who can blame him? He's a half a billionaire, right? He likes the chicks. Don't let them do that to you, because that's definitely where they're taking this thing.
And there was a brilliant interview. Not a big fan of Piers Morgan.
Neither am I, but he's had a couple instances here in the last month where I've gone, good job, Piers.
And he done exactly what you said there, because he was in the middle of an interview with somebody called Lady Colin Campbell, self-described as an aristocrat. And she was sitting there, not sure what pronoun it was using that particular day. And if that offends, well, that's not on me, that's on Lady Colin. But it gave a real insight into how this is actually business as usual for these people, because you could see the confusion in this person's face as to why there was absolutely any problem whatsoever with what had happened, and trying to make a distinct difference between, child prostitution and sex with minors.
Yeah.
And Piers Morgan, like you said, and fair play to him. He challenged it. He didn't take that. He's like, whoa. And further on from there, Charlie, bigger picture. It's something that unfortunately has always kind of simmered beneath the surface when I've looked at these topics whenever they've reared its ugly head. And it's the fact that there's some out there, and I think it's happening right now, that along with the terms like the MAP and stuff, no map, stuff like that, I think there's now this push to, it seems weird even saying it, but to normalize this stuff.
Well, there is.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a plan in place. And Tom DeLay talked about that. He talked about them normalize. He was a House representative from, I forget what state, in the U.S. for a long time. I mean, he was fairly high ranking. I mean, he was in charge of some committees that had had teeth. You know, he knew his way around Washington, and he said that there was a push to normalize 12 perversions. You know, it was like pedophilia, bestiality, necrophilia, and he went on with about a couple of them. I mean, I don't know all 12 of them, but we don't need to know all of them just for this conversation. We just need to know that there is a push to normalize pedophilia. This is nothing new. In fact, if you go back to the UK back in the 70s, you had the PIE, and Pedophile Information Exchange. That is in the United States, you have NAMBLA, National Association of Man-Boy Love Alliance. I mean, what the I mean, you talk about these people are out in the open. They're saying we are in favor of pedophilia. We want the age reduced. What was Pi trying to get it down to? The age of consent reduced to 5? Was that it? I mean, this is insanity. But this has been going for a while. You and I have talked before about how Thatcher's government was crawling with pedophiles. It didn't end there. Blair was involved in it. In the United States, back in the 80s, we had the Franklin scandal, where during Reagan and George H.W. Bush, when he was vice president, they were busted giving tours of the White House to call boys at midnight. This was Craig Spence was running that ring, and you had Lawrence King, who was flying them in from Omaha, Nebraska. This is what was known as the Franklin scandal. Pedophilia in high-ranking positions of government is nothing new. It's been going on for a long, long time. We've talked about the reasons for it. It's pretty dark, but at its core, it's just another form of leverage. You can get if you're a Republican and you're arguing with the Democrats to get a bill passed, you can try to convince that other guy to get the bill passed, and he probably won't see it your way. Then you could go to him and say, well, you do this one for me and I'll do that one for you, and that may work and it may not work. If all else fails, you got the nuclear bomb of options. If you've got the goods on a guy on the other side of your political affiliation who doesn't want to negotiate with you, but you've got the goods on him as a pedophile, well, guess what? He's negotiating with you right now. That's how it works. And so for a lot of people that are maybe new to this, in my book, I talked about control structures. And one of the greatest control structures out there is sexual blackmail. And this is what Epstein was running. This is what Savile was involved in, among other things. I mean, they don't limit themselves to just sexual blackmail, but this is part of it. And when you've got somebody that is engaged in something really horrible like this, you've got them. You've got them for good. It's just a matter of how you choose to use them. Do you want to use them? I mean, do you drag the CEO of some company down to Epstein's Island, get him on videotape with some kid, and then go to him and say, I'm going to, ruin your marriage? Maybe, I'm going to ruin your career. I don't know. I mean, you could if you just want to be mean about it. Or do you say, listen, I want you to tell me 3 weeks in advance before you're about to buy out another company. And then, because if I know that, I'm going to go buy as much stock in that other company as I can. If you tell me you're going to, their stock's at 10, but we're going to pay $16 a share for it, and I know that going in because I've got the goods on you and you're the CEO and you're telling me that because I'm forcing you to tell me that, you can make unlimited money. You could buy options on that. Multiply your money times 8 or 9 or 10 or 100 times in the course of a couple of weeks. So we see this for political purposes. Jeffrey Epstein was clearly doing this for people in positions of high power in Congress, and who knows how high it goes. Obviously, we knew Ehud Barak was involved, so you're talking about prime ministers of Israel and places like that. So this information can be used to just make money too. He could very well have people say, well, he's not running a hedge fund. He could be running his own version of a hedge fund, which is either give me the information and I'm going to insider trade on it, or you've got the goods on some guy that's worth $4 billion. You tell him, give me $1 billion of your money. I'll manage it for you. I'm going to make fees. I'm going to turn it's going to be my typical hedge fund thing, 2% plus 20% of the profits, which is usually what hedge funds go for. Maybe he says, hey, I'll make you a special deal, 3% and 30% of the profits, because I like you so much, you dirty pedophile. And boom, he's starting to make money on this. So he could very well have been running a different version of a hedge fund.
See, I think that's how it works. He's kind of the front man, and he'll extort them for money. But the thing is, it doesn't buy his silence, because his handlers, and you mentioned a name there. Was it Burak?
Ehud Barak, yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to Alex Jones today, or as I call that show now, AJ Anon, because there's all these kind of sources, and it doesn't matter, right? But they were talking about that character there, being a long-time associate of Epstein, and perhaps, I don't know this, I'll get your take on it, perhaps even the handler, along with Maxwell.
Ehud Barak is a bad dude. He was spotted. He's a close friend of Epstein. This is part of the reason why a lot of people believe that the Mossad was involved with running this blackmail ring. I think that Ehud Barak. Let me remind people who this guy is, in case you're wondering if maybe he's just some guy who got mixed up in all this. When on the morning of 9/11, who was the first person in the BBC studio discussing the story of 9/11 and who speculating on who must have been involved, who could have been involved, and what we need to do to stop it? It was Ehud Barak. He was the first guy in there. So, and I think that anybody that has done any sort of substantial research into what really happened in 9/11 understands that there was major Israeli involvement in that operation. And so to have this guy, who was the former prime minister at the time, going on national TV to say, this is terrorism, we need to start the war on terror, everything, you go, well, okay, so this is a dude who is
Charlie,
high ranking.
He was just walking past the building that day, that very neutral building. It just happened to be walking by, and, coincidence, dude. Get him in here. Mm-hmm. The same building that they had the script for the Solomons Brothers building. That third building that collapsed on the day. The same BBC that were interviewing Andrew that we were talking about. Yeah. Oh, the ones that employed Jimmy Savile for 40 years. Just so we're clear here, right? Nothing to worry about. Yeah.
Just so we're clear on this unbiased platform of news gathering professionals. Of course, you and I are clearly being sarcastic about this, but because the BBC is, I think CNN is dirty, but they got nothing on the BBC. The BBC's had 100 years to get it right, it being reprehensible scumbags, and they do a very good job of it too, by the way. But so the Black Book, obviously, Epstein's Black Book has got some real interesting characters in there. And speaking of CNN, lately, they haven't shown much of an appetite to get too deep into the Jeffrey Epstein situation, which is not surprising once you realize that Jeff Zucker, there's pictures of Jeff Zucker's wife hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell in social settings, Jeff Zucker being the president of CNN. Are we, and the president of ABC News, who spiked the story on Epstein, his name showing up on the flight logs on the Lolita Express as well. Oh, what a coincidence, right? I would have never guessed this. Les Moonves, who was the head of CBS, who was let go. What was he let go for? Like only sexual assault with like a bunch of women. And CBS is the one, the network that fired the supposed leaker. So they're all involved in this, in the cover-up, because this is all, as George Carlin said, it's all a big club. We're not in it. They are. And they go to the Council on Foreign Relations, to these meetings, and they sit around and they talk about what they're going to do for the following year. And if you think they don't have their story straight on what they're going to say about Epstein, then you're crazy, because they do. They knew it was coming, and they, in a coordinated effort, pretend like it didn't happen. I mean, ABC, nobody's talking about the ABC Amy Robach story anymore. Not an only alternative media is. So it's up to us to kind of keep any of the important things stored because keep the important stories going in the consciousness of everybody. Because if we leave it up to the mainstream media, they'll never do it.
And we're almost on the break, folks. But Charlie's right, and we've been looking at one kind of tentacle, one tool of this power structure, the overall kind of octopus of global control, and blackmail's a very powerful motivator and tool. And another part of this apparatus, this thing, this organism that Charlie quite rightly describes as the octopus of global control is secret societies. We'll come back after the break and we'll get into some of that with Charlie as well. Right here on tfrlive.com. Don't go anywhere. There we go, Charlie. So, yeah, that was your heads up when we come back after the break. You know, you mentioned, I know they're not a secret society, but the CFR there.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can get into the secret societies as well, because along with the blackmail, that's how they're able to, you know, open doors at the right time, so to speak. You know, Old Boys Club. It's another tool that they use on the ladder up, right?
Yeah, just look at those Rothschild dinner photos from years ago where they've got people showing up wearing antlers, and they've got people with the professional makeup artists have made them look like their faces are split in half and fractured. I mean, and it just goes into this really dark, eyes wide shut sort of motif of
Charlie, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone wears that. Come on, man. You're not buying your missus that for Christmas. Come on, dude.
You have your Christmas antlers ready?
Yeah, come on, man. I mean, don't bother with the antlers. Get the full head on.
I mean, this is crazy. Like, if somebody showed, I mean, you got to give them credit. The costumes are amazing, in a sort of acid trip gone wrong kind of way. I don't know that I would want to, you know, and there's so much symbology too in all of these costumes. You've got people with like split faces that look like multiple personality, or guys wearing boxes that have like 4 faces on each, you know, face on each side, and you're like, oh, that doesn't look like fracturing the human mind into a bunch of pieces and putting it back together all backwards and upside down or anything. Are you going to wear your antler warthog costume tonight, honey? Yeah, I think I am. It's just
fresh
back
out
to the dry
of
cleaners.
Fresh out of warthog costumes, Charlie. Sorry, man. Yeah.
Look at that picture of that lady is just out of control. You know, she's like, how does my hair look? You
That's
know,
just so wrong,
out.
isn't it? Well, what the heck? Imagine winning the lottery. Over here, we've got like the Euro millions, and you get like 100 million, and you're instantly in like the top, like elite rich club. And you end up at one of these parties by, you know, some chance. You would think you'd landed on a different bloody planet, wouldn't you? You know, coming from the working class and thrust into parties where that's walking about. What's that
Honey,
all about?
You're not going to be able to eat the babies with your warthog mask face on. You're going to have to take it off. This isn't very practical. This is what you remember that there's footage of the bass player from the Scorpions on TMZ talking about going to a party where people were paying like $100,000 to kill somebody. He's like, yeah, I saw it. I don't know if you've ever seen that interview. It's crazy.
I have seen that interview. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the world's you see, like, you like Bill Hicks. I like Bill Hicks. You know, he says like life's just a ride. You know, just what part of the roller coaster journey are we on right here? Because it's getting pretty bizarre, dude. Surely we're going to taper out soon, right?
We're at the part where it falls, where you go really hard off the cliff, and you're thinking this might have been a bad idea.
You mean we haven't even reached that point yet? I've been there a few times. Yeah,
that might be where when the fake alien invasion happens. That might be the part where we just go, okay, I went off this ride. This is crazy. I didn't sign up for any of this.
Pretty
nonsense.
bad when the fake alien invasion. You want them to play that card to make things seem normal.
Right.
That's where we're at, folks. Here we go. We're going back live right now. Well, not right now. A couple of seconds. I called it wrong. This is good fun, Charlie. Dark topic, but you know. Has to be done. Just watching the clock here. Before we shift, I'll have to ask you about one of your friends that was there. Here we go. Our number 2, ladies and gentlemen, with author and researcher and my good friend, Charlie Robinson. Don't forget to visit his website, The Octopus of Global Control. And he's got a book out by the same name. And we always get together once a month. And during the break there, we were talking about how we both like comedian Bill Hicks. And, of course, Bill Hicks talks about life just being a ride, you know? It's just a ride. Yeah. And I was saying to Charlie, what part of the ride are we on, though? Because this is never ending, Charlie, man. How much more bizarre can things get at this point?
I don't know. Are we on the ride yet, or are we just still waiting, standing in line with all the other morons, just waiting for this insanity to kick off? I mean, I feel like every year it gets a little crazier.
Every show we do, man. Incremental steps. Yeah.
I show up once a month, like a woman's monthly cycle, bringing.
Very. Don't,
sorry, I don't mean. I might have misgendered somebody.
Yeah, don't exclude us men. We can menstruate as well.
I almost forgot.
It does have men in the. I think the only reason I can see that we might be able to claim it on a game of Scrabble or something is because it starts with men. But apart from that, biologically, I think we might be struggling. You know.
I mean, listen, they're trying to, on social media, they're trying to convince men to buy tampons.
And they've taken
we've reached peak insanity here. Yeah. What planet did I wake up on?
No. Worse. I don't know. Maybe on a par. They took the symbol for female off one of the I think it's one of the sanitary products because, you know, that might offend people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where does it end, man?
You know what? I think actually it's probably a good thing that we're going through this. Like the hijacking of words we're seeing a lot of. Let's go through this cycle as quickly as we can, because I think we're starting to see this woke culture backfiring when people like Dave Chappelle do their special and they just annihilate the social justice warriors, and everyone is like, yes, finally, we're done with that. We're done with people trying to control words, and we're done with 96 different genders, and we're done with trying to sell tampons to men, and we're done with Desmond the Amazing, trying to turn him into a legend as a kid. And we're done with sex reassignment surgery for 6-year-olds and hormones. This is insanity, and you're liable to be called crazy for pointing it out. This is sort of the goes back to the John Lennon quote about how, if you point out we're being run by maniacs for maniacal purposes, and if you point it out, you're labeled to be labeled as a crazy person yourself. But like, it's so obvious right now. You've got drag queens reading story time to a bunch of young kids while wearing skirts with no underwear and flashing them. And then you've got this stuff that's been hitting the news this last week about, teaching 6-year-olds the proper way to touch themselves. That was a big thing in the United States media. And everyone that I have talked to about this is shaking their head going, what is going on here? Because this isn't the gay agenda. The gay agenda just wants to be treated fairly and left alone. They're not behind this.
Well said.
They don't want people picking on them. And I don't know many people that have a problem with the gay community. The gay community is pretty cool. Like they really don't lower themselves. That's
what I like about this audience.
This nonsense.
This audience, they get it. They see that it's not personal attacks on anyone's choice. It's the bigger picture. These people are actually victims because they're being used. Their real fight against prejudice. Not that long ago. And it still goes on today. That's been used as a tool to change culture, basically.
Yeah, it's scary too.
Yeah,
because
big time,
you're getting to a point now. People are getting thrown off of Twitter for saying, yeah, but women aren't men. Like, that is a statement of fact. And This it reminds me of like the George Orwell, right? The Winston character, 2 + 2 is 5, and he's going, no, 2 + 2 is 4. And I feel like it's the same thing right now. Like I feel like they are sitting around a big boardroom table and they're kind of laughing, going, let's see if we can convince all these people that women are men and men are women and boys can be girls and everybody can get their period at a certain time.
When we let them away with telling people that 2 + 2 can equal 5, that was it. They all looked at each other and said, they actually allowed that. Let's go for it. Let's, like you say, it's that scene. Anyone that's read the book or watched the movie, it's that exact thing, telling you black's white and the opposite.
Yeah. So there's two things we can do. We can either say, no, you're crazy, or we can just turn them off. It's clear that they're crazy. It's clear that the people pushing this agenda are out of their minds. I don't even think that's debatable. But I feel like we should maybe the best strategy is to just turn off the TV, don't argue with them on social media. I feel like it's just like a gigantic game to try and see if they can get us riled up. It does a pretty good job because I get fairly pissed off about this because it's so preposterous. But then there's part of me that just, if I take a step back and I take the emotion out of it and I just observe what I see, it's hilarious what's happening. I mean, there's serious components to it, right? I understand
Charlie,
they're taking us down that path, but
let me add to that because the online presence, if you arrived here from outer space and you wanted to judge the world and you look at the online, kind of the internet first, you'd be lulled into a false sense of kind of idea that these people are everywhere. SJWs are absolutely everywhere. They're the majority, right? And it appears that way because it's elevated on social media, but I also speculate that they use botnets as well. It's easy enough to use botnets when there's recognized terms in Woketopia, as I call it. And not only that, but, most of the people, the real genuine humans who actually go and get outraged on social media over this, it's not somebody per se from the gay community. It's somebody like that's maybe heterosexual, and they're only doing it in reality to feel like they're part of this illusionary herd that's online that's been elevated and looks bigger than it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A lot of this is fake.
Because when you go out, Charlie, you're not tripping over them. They're not everywhere in your face or anything. So the real world and the digital world, you've got to separate the two.
For sure. Yeah. If you go off of it's a disproportionate presence on the internet. I think that I read that transgendered community is 0.5% in the United States. So that would put them at about 15 million people. A lot of people, right? But 0.5% means 1 out of 200. So if you walk into a theater, maybe you see one person who's transgendered. I don't. I really don't. I mean, maybe it's clustered in, that's probably different in San Francisco, New York, or Los Angeles, or not even Los Angeles, but more communities like West Hollywood in Los Angeles. Really concentrated communities. And that might be in part because it's a little bit more normalized, a little bit more, there's safety. And I'm not trying to say that every transgendered person is out there pushing this agenda, because my guess, and it's just a guess, but my guess is that a lot of the people that are transgendered are just looking for acceptance and safety. They just don't want to be mocked, and they just don't want to be hurt. And I can respect that totally. And if that's what you're into, we can't do that to the trans community. We can't do that to them. But it's gone beyond that, where it's like, no, you have to not just acknowledge it, you have to embrace it and celebrate it. And if you don't celebrate it to the level that they want you to, then you are transphobic and you should be deplatformed and shunned and fined and arrested and all of these things. And you just sort of looking around going, what are you talking about? Like, what do you want? What do you want in the trans community? What are you after? Are you after acceptance and normalization? I'm sorry. You're never going to be accepted and normalized if you're 6'7" with platform heels and you're wearing a blue thong and go-go boots and your hair's pink, you don't want acceptance and normalization. That's not what you're really looking for. You're looking to be a spectacle. You're looking for people to find you unique, like a unicorn or something like that. And that's fine, but let's not pretend that this is about acceptance and normalization. Because if you really want, if the hardcore trans community wants to be accepted, then stop acting like jackasses. Stop doing this. Or stop letting the people that are purported to run your organization, your social circle, stop having them do things like this, because they're doing a disservice to the legitimate trans people that are just trying to feel protected and safe, and not be criticized and not be marginalized and not be outed and physically harmed by a bunch of small-minded morons. But you're not doing yourself any favor by going to this far extreme, by demanding that everybody must accept it and pretend like you're not a dude when you are a dude. And it's ma'am, all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but those people have to take a look in the mirror and go, there's a certain percentage of the population, I don't know, 90%, that is not going to just automatically accept me as a woman away.
That guy was looking for that. And it's a guy,
of course,
because there's no expectation on anyone, or there shouldn't be an expectation on anyone to know the gender of somebody that looks the same as what they were biologically born as, i.e.
Right.
Born a boy. You look a guy. And if you do happen to get it wrong, well, you didn't know. You were only saying what you've seen. You didn't intend to offend absolutely anyone. And there's no onus on you at that point. It shouldn't be on you. You shouldn't be made to feel guilty. And it's on that other person. And like you say, and thank you, Lance, like you say, it's all about being the spectacle. They want to be seen. They want to be triggered.
For sure. Like I said, so I grew up in a town called Palm Springs in California, and Palm Springs has a huge gay population. West Hollywood has probably the biggest. San Francisco has the biggest, but West Hollywood has probably the highest concentration. And Palm Springs is probably third behind that. I think the statistics show that maybe a third of the population, it's about 50,000 people that live in the town. About a third of them are gay people. So I grew up around that. It's very normal to me to see a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, and who cares? It's not a big deal. I mean, even if I hadn't grown up there, to the point now where it's like, it's not a novelty. It's not. So it's not about the gay community. I think the gay community is going to be victimized by this because they're sort of getting dragged into it. And the gay community has worked very hard to make sure that people take them seriously, and they should, because they're not aliens. They just happen to like someone of the same sex. Like, in and of itself, who really honestly cares? It's not my business. It's if you're a gay person and you're nice to everybody and you want good things and you're a decent human being, why should anyone care like what your sexuality is? It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. But the part where you start to take it to this next level, where you're aggressively going after children to try to convert them and try and normalize the fact that Bob is dressed like a fairy, but he's gigantic and he's wearing a skirt, but he didn't put his underwear on because he thinks it's funny, and he's going to do somersaults while he's doing the reading to a bunch of 4-year-olds. If you think that you're not going to get backlash for this, you're out of your mind. Because I think the majority of people, especially in conservative areas, are going to look at that and go, no, thank you. We'll all pass on that. We're not interested in that sort of nonsense. And so I think that it's important for the people that are pushing this trans agenda, financed mostly by the Pritzker family, which has been behind a lot of this nonsense. They've financed it to $40+ million. There's a darker agenda to some of this, as we like to go down. We sort of go down these rabbit holes and everything. There is what Tom DeLay talked about, the normalizing of perversions. I'm not going to say that everybody that is transgendered is a pervert. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say that the legitimate trans community has been hijacked by maniacs that have a different agenda than just the sort of normal person who is feels like they're in the wrong body. It's got to be incredibly, frustrating and confusing and angering to feel that way, to feel like you've been born in the wrong body. And I think that they will get a sympathy and compassion from the majority of people that just see another human being hurting, and they don't want them to feel confused or hurt. They want acceptance into a community, and I think they should absolutely get acceptance into the community. Do they need a third bathroom? I don't know, probably not. Does it need to be taken to this cartoonish level where, we're in rubber bondage outfits and reading to kids and changing the words of the nursery rhymes to include they and them instead, Z and Zim and all this. Like, I think that once you go down this path, you're sort of making a mockery of your own little agenda. And I think that most of the people that are watching this from the outside, just sort of like with no dog in this fight, so to speak, are looking at this and they're laughing. They're laughing at first, but I think getting legitimately angry now. I think that the non-crazy trans community sees this as beyond a publicity stunt, and getting into the range and getting into the area where you're starting to if you want to go dress like a weirdo and parade around, got no problem with that. No matter what your sexual orientation, whether you're goth, whether you're into Renaissance fairs and you want to dress up like Obi-Wan Kenobi and go to the grocery store, I don't care. But once you start involving children in it and you start teaching the children that all of this stuff is really normal when it's not, then you're going to get pushback from the more traditional community that's going to say, we've had enough of this. And I think that's where we're going. We're getting a lot of people that are like, I've had it with this stuff. I've had it with this trying to normalize the sexualization of children. Like with Desmond, we talked about that. We talked about how Michael Alec, his handler, is a convicted murderer who did 17 years in prison for chopping up his drug dealer boyfriend Angel and throwing him in the Hudson River back in the 90s. This is a problem. This is beyond like, oh, let's all just have, Gay Pride Month. This is like, we're bordering on something very dangerous here. And that's not some small-minded person. I'm not being a small-minded redneck who's like, yeah, just those homosexuals, we got to do away with. I'm not saying that. This is a runaway agenda that is being financed by some social engineers that have a much bigger plan than most people can recognize.
This thing, it should be like religion, it's a personal gig. Each to their own. If you're not harming anyone and you can find consenting others that are into your gig, crack on. That's what I say. And Charlie, people might think that you don't have a kind of dog in this fight, so to speak, but it might be unbeknown to people that Charlie himself, he dabbles in cross-dressing of sorts. He's a bit of a transnational. Because didn't you at one point fancy yourself and identify as a raging Saudi Arabian?
Yes.
There he is, folks. Yes,
there
indeed.
I am.
Yes. See, I out you live on air, dude. There you go. You're outed. So yes, Charlie Robinson, transnational.
I'm the I'm the chic in that you can't really see it very well there. I'm in the light blue, far left, sitting next to the window. Yeah, that was. I think it goes without saying that picture was pre 9/11.
I was gonna say now that must have been a hard gig to get away with.
Yeah, that was the day before Halloween. We were flying from LA to Las Vegas, and we got on the plane dressed as sheiks. I mean, nobody accused us of not being sheiks. One of the guys in our group was Chinese. I mean, we had a Chinese sheik, for God's sakes. Nobody said anything. They were like, "Oh my God!" Like they really thought that we were like royalty.
You see, if that had been after 9/11, I'd have actually thought maybe they didn't say anything in case they offended you. Because everyone's scared to offend everyone now.
Yeah. Well, when that picture that was taken, you notice there's nobody else on the airplane with us. That's because when we landed, the flight attendant's like, She goes, I'm going to need you guys to just go ahead and stay seated and let the rest of the people get off the flight. And I just turned to my buddy and go, we're going to jail. There's no doubt about it. We're definitely going to jail. And everyone got off. And then the pilot came walking down the aisle and he goes, I hear we got some royalty on this flight. And we're like, yeah. And he says, you want to come sit in the cockpit, take some pictures? And we're like, absolutely. So there's pictures of us dressed as sheiks in the cockpit with the captain. So... the days
not anymore,
before
right?
TSA. Not anymore.
Not
yeah,
anymore.
try that now. Trying to get through security now. I would have a full body cavity search by the boys in blue and black here at
Not
the
by
TSA.
not by the probing grey aliens. But Charlie, you mentioned the TSA there. Definitely far from a secret group. And before the end of hour one, I mentioned the secret societies and another part of the operating system, if you may, of the Octopus of Global Control. We dealt with the blackmail aspect, how that can be used in the corridors of power. But also we have the old boys network, as it's sometimes referred to, Yale University, all that stuff there. The secret societies as well, the ones that are known, the ones that aren't known. And then you've got the open ones that rule the world and drive politics, the CFR, places like this. I mean, your take on how all of this goes together to be into the bigger picture of control.
Yeah, these organizations, Trilateral Commission is mostly revolving around banking. Council on Foreign Relations has they have a little bit of everything. They got a lot of media people. So like when you wonder why the media sort of stays on track with a certain story. Some stories you find them on every media platform, every news network, and some important stories that you would expect to see don't happen. They get their marching orders, their bosses get their marching orders at the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations meetings. And that's where they sit down with lots of powerful businessmen, powerful people in media, and they hammer out what the agenda is going to be for the next year or so. And if you think that I'm mistaken about that, just find the video of Hillary Clinton explaining that she's so happy that the new Council on Foreign Relations building is up and running, because then she doesn't have to go too far to find out what she's to be told what she needs to do, which is what she said, how she described it, is to be told what she needs to do. So these politicians, these goblins like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and George W. Bush and all these people, I mean, these people are controlled. There's obviously people above them. And part of the people that are above them are these committees, these secret societies. We know about George W. Bush being in Skull and Bones, as well as George H.W. Bush. And John Kerry, too. I mean, I remember that came up in the 2004 election, and didn't take long before, what's his name? He asked it on, what was it, Face the Nation? You know who I'm talking about, who dropped dead after he asked John Kerry and George W. Bush about Skull and Bones, 332, anything.
I can picture him, but I can't remember the name.
I know the name. I'm going to remember it as soon as we hang up, and it's going to drive me crazy. But anyway, so these are real. The secret societies, a lot of people will say, oh, you conspiracy theorists with your crazy secret societies, and this is all nonsense. Well, if you want to get black belt level about conspiracy secret societies, just look up the Ninth Circle. You want to do that. That's as dark as it gets. We've got the Committee of 300, which is, staffed with a bunch of people like Prince Philip's a member.
That one there, the 300, the Club of Rome sometimes, but that's one of the ones that they really don't like you looking at all. I remember Clyde Lewis doing a show, and it was a author called, I think it was David Coleman. I think that was his name anyway. And they went for a break, and they were talking about the Committee of 300 and his book. He wrote a book about them. And when they came back after the break, it was mega weird because, put it this way, the interview was cut short. Somebody had called him during the break, and he wouldn't be able to go on with that interview.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah. But the point being, folks, that some of these, the lesser known ones, Very real indeed. And we talk about the Masons a lot here on the show. We have a laugh and a joke. We've got a great listener who calls in, very knowledgeable about the Masons. But there's also these other groups, Charlie, isn't there, that are so influential.
For sure. Yeah. If everybody's heard about them, like the Freemasons, then they're probably not as big of a threat as people might want to make them out to be. Because or at least maybe a better way of saying that is that, the 97% of the people in that organization have no idea what the top 3% are really doing.
Absolutely.
And they finance that. I mean, the money from the people with the lower tiers comes in, and it helps to keep this whole thing going. Meanwhile, the people at the top are doing some unspeakable stuff. And that kind of goes for the Vatican as well. I mean, I think that once you get up into that level, you're in a dark area.
There we go, folks. There's the music. I can't believe it. I thought we still had about 5 minutes to go there. We'll be back on the other side. Don't go anywhere. And don't forget Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew coming up after the Kev Baker Show, right here on TFRlive.com. What is it good for? Wowzers, bro. Wowzers. This is flying by tonight. I want to thank everyone. 269 souls in the chat room watching this right now. Big shout out to all of you. Don't forget, please check out Charlie on social media, the Octopus of Global Control, and also check out his book. I highly recommend it. Great subject matter, great quotes from the mouths of the very elites that we're talking about. And it exposes this plan. They hide things in plain sight, Charlie, right? And that's how it's people like yourself and others over the past few decades have been able to take what they've done and said and piece it together.
Yeah, and I don't have any special skills that everybody else listening doesn't already have either. Just curious about it, dug into it as deep as I could, talked to a bunch of people, and sat down and decided to write about it. But I think one thing that all of us should remember is that we have a role in this. We can play a part in this. You can learn as much as you can about these interesting and obviously sometimes dark topics. Educate yourself, educate people around you. I remember we're coming up on Thanksgiving now here in the U.S. and I remember bringing up 9/11 at a Thanksgiving dinner years and years ago and watching the table just turn on me like I had taken a dump on the
like a lead balloon.
Right?
Wow.
I mean, it was like everybody's face sort of looked at me and I was like, what? I mean, isn't this what we're
Too soon.
I mean, I could have gone with the whole idea that the story behind Thanksgiving was nonsense, and I spared them that, right? I didn't bring that up. I just talked about how it's physically impossible for 3 buildings to fall after getting hit by 2 planes. Is that too bad? But anyway, my point is that I was unprepared for that debate at that dinner table at that moment in my life. And so all of us are sort of on this path of trying to piece together this information that we don't have all of, by the way. We're still completing this mismatch jigsaw puzzle of facts, as Stephen Bassett from Paradigm Research described it in one of my favorite quotes, probably my favorite quote that I put in the book about the big jigsaw puzzle as he describes it. We're all trying to put these pieces together. And like a big jigsaw puzzle, the more people trying to put the pieces together, the faster you'll get it figured out. So it's important for us all to do what we can. Maybe you can research it and you can find out some more information that we don't know and make us inform us of all of it. Great. Maybe you're in a position where you've got more money than time. Then I would say donate some money to your favorite alternative research people. Throw some super chats Kev's way. I mean, maybe you don't have the time to research it, but he does, and he has the skills, but help finance his operation. I mean, there are ways to be involved that way as
Far
well.
too kind, Charlie. I rely on great researchers and authors like you. You some of the research you've done for this book, though, and when we come back, I'll be asking you a question about the book. We're about to go back live now. But yeah, folks, check out the book, honestly. And Charlie's done a lot of interviews on a lot of current events as well as just the book as well. Go and check him out all over YouTube. He's been on this network, TFR Live, as well. And I know we're on YouTube right now, but check out all of Charlie's info. Here we go, folks. Final segment of today's show right here on TFRlive.com. But don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow with Brendan Drackler. Yes, indeed. We'll be talking about space, black holes, and a whole host of other topics. Jason with a super chat there. And we'll hear my AI assistant.
Charlie rocks, peace sign.
Yes, there we go. Charlie rocks. Do you like me dancing there, Charlie? And nice little pineapple suit on.
I do like you dancing. Anytime to see you dance is good, but the pineapple head.
I know.
Disturbing.
Different, right? But listen.
It's different.
You're the author of The Octopus of Global Control, and it's a book with over 500 quotes, I believe. And what I was going to ask you was, either what's your top 3 quotes, in your opinion, or maybe 3 of the quotes that really shocked you when you were researching it. Whatever you think,
Well, there's a couple that I just mentioned. Stephen Bassett. He's the executive director of Paradigm Research, and I wish I had it in front of me, but I don't. It's a quote talking about imagine that this world is a big jigsaw puzzle, and and that the gist of it is, you come into this life, you're given a box, and you set off to try and put this puzzle together with all these pieces. But what you don't realize is that the government that you live under has made a decision to interfere with that process, and they have taken some of the pieces out of your puzzle and have thrown them away, and they've taken other pieces from another puzzle and thrown them into your box. And you don't know this, and you're going about your life trying to put the pieces together, thinking that if I put this together, I will have a picture of the world as it really is. And what Stephen Bassett was trying to explain in this quote was that you will never have a full picture of it because you don't have all the pieces, because some of them have been thrown away, and and some of the other pieces have been replaced by pieces that don't fit this puzzle. And so that, to me, I thought was a good quote. Another one that I like is David Rockefeller thanking the media for their complicity in holding up their end of the bargain as far as the silence about the plan for the New World Order. He mentioned this in 1991 in Germany at Bilderberg there, and this quote was alarming to me because clearly, you don't get too many David Rockefeller quotes on the nightly news back then, or really ever. And of course, nobody heard this quote, but it's kind of like if you read it, you would be like, Jesus, did he really say this? I mean, is this real? And the answer is, yeah, it's real. It's him thanking the media at Bilderberg for keeping their mouth shut, because we're all trying to put the New World Order together, and we can't do it if the public is aware of it, and the media could make them aware of it. And we appreciate you honoring your commitment to keeping a lid on this. So when you think the news is giving you all the information that's fit to print, you're out of your mind. They're not. They're owned by these people. These people own the media. I don't mean just figurative sense. I mean, they literally own the media companies. They own controlling stakes in these platforms. You think Rupert Murdoch has it in his best interest to tell you exactly how things work? Absolutely not. He's trying to collect as much money and make you as stupid as possible in the process so that you don't wise up and figure out his scam. So I really liked those two quotes the most. And then maybe the third one is from John Francis Hyland, who was the mayor of New York City. And he is the one who, I've read this quote before on here. He's talking about the sprawling octopus with its tentacles in every aspect of our society, talking about the media, talking about banking, the courthouses, the police, government. Every aspect is controlled by this great octopus. He was referring to the Standard Oil interests. But, you know, once you get done reading this quote, you don't know who said it until you get to the bottom. And you don't know when it was said until you get to the bottom. And it says John Francis Hyland, mayor of New York City, 1922. And you realize, geez, man, it's been a century of this stuff, at least a century. This mayor of New York City, who would know, you know, as the mayor of New York City, is saying that these corporations, these really greedy, disturbing people, this octopus, has taken control of everything. I mean, if you read that quote today, you would just assume some guy wrote it last week. So those are a couple of the quotes that stuck with me. There's actually 700 quotes in the book by 500 different people. Some of them are your usual suspects, the Clintons and Bushes and Rockefellers and Rothschilds and all those maniacs that you would expect to be in there. But also, you know, George Carlin, Bill Hicks, Joe Rogan, guys that had an interesting take on things, guys that were able to sort of sit back, especially comedians that are really good at observing the insanity of this world, to hear their take on it, and to hear, you know, Joe Rogan described religion as being like a scaffolding that is on the side of a building that keeps people in line from going too far off. And it's sort of the framework that allows people to do the right thing.
Charlie, you see, comedy over the ages for me, even going back to court jesters and things, it's been a really important part of society, right? Because it's been able to point out some of the bad stuff that's going on, and almost comedians, you know, would get a bit of a pass. They could do that. They could make fun of it. But we were talking about the war on the language earlier on. You mentioned Dave Chappelle and his, you know, what's deemed outrageous comedy. All he's doing is telling it how it is. And it seems so really kind of risky, because nobody's willing to speak like that in public anymore. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, realistically, honestly, do you think this could be the last wave of comedians as we know them?
Possibly. I mean, I understand if people get upset about Louis C.K., you know, doing what he was doing. What he was doing, you know, is like majorly inappropriate. I don't know that anyone would deny that what he was doing in front of these women was awful. Taking that out of the equation, the topics that comedians cover, they should be free to talk about whatever they want. There's a self-policing mechanism in comedy, and that is the fear of bombing. You know, Joe Rogan describes it as sucking 1,000 you-know-whats in front of your mom. And so if you're bad, if your jokes don't land, if your topics are not connecting, you'll get taken care of by not getting any laughs, not getting rebooked. We just went through this with my buddy Sam Tripoli, who is the host of Tinfoil Hat, and he just got his YouTube channel taken away last week. Now, in sort of a weird sort of cross-pollination of my friends from different worlds, Jeff Berwick, who is the founder of Anarchapulco, and he's a guy that I've co-written a new book with that should be out pretty soon. Jeff had gone to LA to be on Tinfoil Hat that morning, the morning that things got taken off by YouTube. Sam didn't have any strikes against his channel at all. He wasn't warned. He was monetized on almost all of his videos. And just woke up one morning and it was gone. And Jeff was in town to do it, and they communicated, and he's like, well, are we still on? And Sam said, yeah, come to the studio, let's do it anyway. So they did it. Now, I sent Sam a text on Saturday when YouTube put his channel back up, and they never gave him a reason for why they took it down. From what I heard, I don't know this to be a fact because I haven't talked about. I just saw it posted from Sam, but I don't know if it's true. But apparently, he said he got Joe Rogan involved, and Joe made some calls, and things got sorted out. But we don't have Joe. You know, you and I don't have Joe Rogans that we can call to get these things taken care of. And this culture, this current culture of social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, just deciding to silence voices that they disagree with is alarming. And the comedians, and I talked to Sam about this, just privately, like when you do, you can't do colleges, right? And he's like, God, no, I could never do a college. They would yank me off the stage halfway through. It used to be that colleges that's like the gold mine. That's where you go because you got a bunch of kids that are young and funny, have a sense of humor, and they understand what's going on, and they're, that's the perfect audience, or at least it used to be. Now with this whole social justice warrior woke culture garbage, what you get is comedians that get halfway through their set and somebody from the audience goes to the promoter and says, I'm offended, get this guy off the stage, and they're pulling him off the stage. So this is a really dangerous time, because I don't know if this is intentional, but like you said, the court jester was always allowed to make fun of the king because he was a comedian and he was doing it in jest and it was funny. But if a serious person said the same thing that the comedian said about the king, off with your head, And so perhaps part of this agenda, part of this silencing of dissenting voices, or silencing anybody that goes against the official approved narrative or the official understanding of the way an event went down officially, even though none of the evidence, makes any sense of it. You would technically, if you were trying to quiet these voices, you would want to get rid of the comedians as well. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what happened with Louis C.K. I mean, what he did, his behavior was pretty reprehensible. But the world has a way of sort of sorting those people out. I don't know that you need to have torches and pitchforks to go after a guy like that. You could just, if everybody universally went, oh, that guy's a creep, I'm not going to his show, I'm not watching his comedy special because I'm just not into that sort of thing, well, then that would take care of itself. But these comedians have come under fire a lot lately. Sam's channel is, it's tinfoil hat, right? So he talks about these topics, but if you watch it, and I've done the show a couple times, it's fun. And there's some mean parts, but everyone is just kind of like laughing at the absurdity of it all. And when you're not even allowed to do that anymore, when that is dangerous and that content, A, must mean you're onto something. You're right over the target if you're taking all that flack. And B, like, what's next? First they came for Alex Jones, then they came for the online content creating comedians, then they came for you and me, and then they go for, then they go after the makeup tutorial kids, or whatever. But what they're not going after, they're not taking Desmond, they're not taking the amazing Desmond off of YouTube. That dude's everywhere, right? That stuff is fine. But God forbid you point out the inconsistencies in the Vegas shooting, and boom, you're demonetized, deplatformed, depersoned, you're everything, So it's a weird world we're living in. And as we get closer to December of 2019, we have to remember what we just saw recently with YouTube announcing that they're making changes to their policy about as far as content creators that aren't economically viable. Well, what does that mean? It means that you don't have enough viewers, or you're not monetizing your channel to allow ads to be played. Well, like, what is that? To me, it just seems like a really broad term that can be used to take out whoever they deem not economically viable. And so that's a scary thing. I think that we will see purges coming in December when YouTube kicks off this new policy, and it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, I was just seeing somebody saying, who's Desmond? And wow, there's a rabbit hole to go down. I don't know
if you don't know who Desmond is,
yeah.
Good. Don't learn.
Exactly.
Stay away from it.
I was going to say,
stay as far away from it.
I don't know if it's the best thing to put. I don't know if it's the best thing to put into Google, to be honest with you. But no, you mentioned your new book there, and what's that going to be all about? And when can we expect to see that, Charlie?
Should be out pretty soon. So if you don't know who Jeff Berwick is, I will remind you. Jeff Berwick was one of the two guys. He was the guy with Luke Rudowski who went to Epstein's Island barefoot, shirtless, couple glasses of wine in, running around on that island filming it. So it's going to be it'll be out for an Acapulco this year. So that's February. I will kind of leave it at that. We're finishing up some last minute edits, but it's going to be about the American Empire. It's going to be about the as we stand here. We all sort of are guilty. All of us are guilty of normalcy bias, where we just sort of feel like because today was normal and yesterday nothing major happened, that means that tomorrow will be fine and nothing will happen then. And it's probably true most of the days, but when you are objective about the way these empires end, and they all end, what we're looking at right now are the last days of the American Empire, and the majority of people don't know that. They don't want to know that. They want to put their heads in the sand and pretend like nothing is really happening. But for those of us that are paying attention to the world, this is we're at the end stages of this. I take no pleasure saying that as an American and as a human being and as somebody that just wants to be left alone and live my life without, the insanity of government. I just wish that I didn't see things this way. I wish I saw bright things on the horizon, but I don't. And so part of what the book is it looks back on the empires of the past and how they fizzled out and how the people in their societies didn't know it was coming until it was too late. And so that's what the book kind of gets in. That's a very rough description of it. But once it's out, I'll come back on. Obviously, I'll be back on anyway, but I'll come back on and give it to you in great detail. So yeah, that's where we.
And that's one thing I really like about you and why we click, because you don't have any political leaning. You're able to look at the situation, even in your own country, which is hard. It's hard for me to look at what's going on in the UK right now. I mean, talk about throwing democracy out the window. I mean, I'm pretty sure we had a Brexit vote and we were meant to be out ages ago. And I look at what's going on in your country as well. And where's it all going then, Charlie? Your book, you've looked at the bigger plan. I mean, in their own words, I mean, pick out a couple of quotes for us where they want or where they visualize us going.
Well, I think that Agenda 2030 is a good place to look as far as how they envision a future for us. And it used to be Agenda 21, which was the plan for the 21st century. Then that benchmark kind of came and went. And so they moved the goalposts out to 2030, the year 2030. And Agenda 2030 is this concept that's created by the United Nations. And it's talking about how they see the future, sustainable cities, smart cities. And what that means is, moving you into much smaller living spaces, doing away with fossil fuels, doing away with your ability to communicate in certain ways. And this isn't speculation. It's not, it may or may not happen this way, but the ideas of where they want you to go, they write about it. It's publicly available. It's freely accessible. You can dig in and find out the information about what they have planned for this. And part of that, now you look in the Green New Deal that they were talking about putting into place here in the United States, that ties into it perfectly. And it gets into a really dark Orwellian future where the state is in control of most things. We see the rise in artificial intelligence. We see them talking about a universal basic income. And you're like, why would they be giving us free money? Like, the government hates us. Why are they going to give us free money? Well, they're planning to do away with most people. That's what they want. They want most of us gone. Just look at the Georgia Guidestones. They want, 6.5 billion of us dead. If you talk to Ted Turner, why would you talk to Ted Turner? But if you happen to talk to Ted Turner, he will tell you that he wants 3 or 4 billion people removed from this planet. Never mind that he has 5 grandkids. The people that are always pushing for this never intend to have any of this austerity come down on them. They don't. They want it for you. They want it for me. They don't want it for themselves. This is all stuff that they talk about in their writings about how they envision the world. Well, guess what? You know, the rest of us envision a world without all of these maniacs in charge, without all these criminal politicians, without all these pedophiles that are running the place, without the Rothschilds and Rockefeller families and the DuPonts and the Morgans and the Vanderbilts and and all these reptilians that are running things. We envision a world that's much different from them. And I think that what's important for us to remember, and I know that this gets a bit dark and depressing. It's like, oh my God, it seems like everybody's out to get us. Actually, a very, very, very small percentage of the population is out to get us. The majority of us are decent human beings. I think what we need to remember, and we lose sight of this, we all do, myself included, is that there are far more of us than there are of them. And when we decide that the game is over, the game's over. It's just about coordinating us, getting the information out there, getting everybody on the same page to say, hey, do you guys all see what's going on here? Do you see how they're running this world? It's not for our benefit, it's for their benefit. And guess what? If we all just decided tomorrow that we're not participating in this anymore, they would have no power. And so we need to remember that. It's hard to do, but we owe it to ourselves to remember that the very few are controlling the masses, and it doesn't have to be that way. And we do have to take responsibility for our own actions. We do have to acknowledge that we've been asleep for a very long time, and like any time that you're asleep, when you're waking up to it, you kind of just want to hit the snooze button and go back to sleep for a little bit longer. We can't do that. They count on that. They depend on that. They count on us being disjointed and separated from one another. Why do you think they're always trying to divide us? Black and white, this country, that country, trans versus straight, gay versus straight, the rich versus the poor. It's just division. It's just divide and conquer. They just try to chop you down into as many small little pods as you can so that you don't all join up together and decide that this is ridiculous and that you guys have a queen. That's crazy.
I swore an oath to her, dude. I know.
It's silly.
I know. I know.
It's dangerous.
She's not
and
just any old
things.
queen, though. She's not any old queen. She's literally a shapeshifter, dude. Come on.
I know. Well, I mean, I guess if you're going to swear an allegiance to anyone, it might as well be a shapeshifting reptilian.
There's not many hosts that you join that will openly admit that they were in a shapeshifter's army at one point. There you go.
Yeah. Well,
not a good claim to fame. I get it. But you're right, Charlie. And that's why I really love being here at tfrlive.com, because one of the phrases that we use is silence is consent. And we are up against a very, 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 very small minority when you put the numbers together. There's billions of us folks, okay? But there's great power, not just in the blackmail we've talked about, not just in the secret societies and all the other physical apparatus that they use to control the many, but there's also a spiritual aspect to this as well, as we've touched upon many, many times on the show, and it's a magical component to it. And it sounds weird, it sounds crazy, but literally, that silence is consent. When they put things out there and we say nothing, it almost adds to the likelihood that not only is it going to happen, but they almost laugh at us as well, Charlie. Yeah. And we really do have to speak out, even if it's just telling somebody at work or somebody you know really well. Don't go truth spewing, as we sometimes call it, just shouting at people in the street and losing the plot. I get it. When you first wake up, it can be infuriating. But, be practical. Can't change the world, but even sowing the seed in somebody's mind, giving them the book like Charlie's, opening their eyes, that's going to change their world, Charlie. And then they go to the next person, and perhaps over time, we can be optimistic.
Yeah, you never know. You never know a conversation that you have with somebody if that might be the thing that triggers them to wake up to this insanity. I mean, for me, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, that book did a ton to wake me up. But also watching, you know, an earlier version of Alex Jones was helpful. I mean, you say what you want about him, but there was a time when he was really just dropping truth on people.
Well, I watch him every
David
day
Icke,
still. Yeah, I watch him every day. I criticize him, but you know, I
yeah,
watch him. You know, and like you say,
yeah,
he's one of the ones that woke me up. So I
yeah.
have to kind of make that clear when I do laugh about him.
For sure, and I, you know, I laugh at him too,
Exactly, he
and
laughs at
but
himself for goodness sake.
he laughs at himself. You have to laugh at yourself, especially if you're him. It's kind of hard to tell what part is a character and what part of it is real life. But you don't need to send people Alex Jones clips to wake them up. You can just ask them a simple question like, "Do you know a third building fell on 9/11?" Like something like that, and have that discussion if you want, or you can. You know, like my book, I think it is a good gift for people. Christmas, right? If they don't like to read it, if they get halfway through it and get bored, they can at least use it as a doorstop or beat somebody over the head with it if they try to break into the house. Whatever. Get creative.
And remember, folks, stay tuned. We've got Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew on the way right here on TFRlive.com. Charlie Robinson, ladies and gentlemen, the Octopus of Global Control. Check out his website. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Well, Charlie, there we go. Thank you to the YouTube audience for putting up with us two crazy cats for 2 hours. It's been great as usual, man.
Yeah, thank you, YouTube people, for watching and hanging out and tipping Kev. He does a lot of work. I hope everybody appreciates that. You know, I mean, I think a lot of us take this free content for granted, but the content creators out there like you and you know all the great YouTube shows, we get a little bit spoiled. We get it for free. You know, but if you've got extra money and you're in the super chat and you want to throw a couple bucks down, I think that not only is it needed, but it's certainly appreciated by everybody. So,
and sometimes with topics like that, you need a dancing Kev in a pineapple suit to lighten the load.
Absolutely,
exactly,
yeah.
Dude. Exactly. No, thank you, Charlie, and thank you to everyone out there. Yes, thank you for the super chats. Remember, we need 4 more members. I'll be back tomorrow on the Safe Space, well, the Kev Baker Show, daytime show. I don't know what to call it. But then we'll be back tomorrow night with Brendan Drackler as well. We'll be blasting off into space. Yes, we'll have our NASA helmets on. Indeed. So we'll be triggering people with all of that tomorrow, right here, same time, same place. So I will let you get back to it. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo. We're out of here, folks.